lesser extent there, in what came to be known as the Black Power uprising in the country. We're talking about 1970. Those developments arose from the protests of students at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine. It has been 54 years since these developments, and while the NJAC has survived and continues to promote and to support activities having to do with social justice in the country, leading members of the group left and formed other organizations while with similar intentions and ambitions. Mbao Mohini is now the chairman of the NJAC. He remains one of the continuing torchbearers of the organization. He's our guest on today's edition of the program as we look back on the road thus traveled 1970 to 2024. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm fine.
All right. I want to start by saying, so looking back 54 years ago, yeah. NJAC was then an amalgam organization representing a host of different organizations, sort of ostensibly at least, trying to achieve the same ends in the country, which was to bring in what now we talk about as social justice. Let's start with that. That's correct?
Yeah, yes, that is correct, you know. But I would have liked our listeners and viewers to be apprised of the fact that on the 26th of February, last Monday, we observed 3 anniversaries, which would have been 1969, the formation of the National Joint Action Committee, because we speak a lot about 1970. 1970 came exactly, or was launched exactly 1 year later on the very date, 26th of February. Right. And you are quite correct when you say it was an amalgam of various organizations who were seeking social justice at that particular point in time, 8 years after independence, and we had not seen anything really tangible for it. Yes, you had the parliament being established, you had a prime minister, you had our national flag, our anthem, etc. But in terms of the transformation of the society, that is where we fell down. So that in effect, that independence was not really of substance and meaning where the lives of our people was concerned, okay?
So and the February 26th movement, it became sort of an entity in itself, an idea and an aspiration in itself.
The February 26th. On that date, the National Joint Action Committee held a demonstration. It was not very large, but it focused a lot on some students who were at Sir George Williams University in Canada, who had been protesting against a racist white professor, Professor Anderson, who used to mark down the black students and have them failing.
In Montreal, to be exact.
So that the students there were not from Trinidad and Tobago alone. You had possibly about 12 students from Trinidad and Tobago, but you had from the other Caribbeans, in the Caribbean, as well as there were other students who had been arrested and put on similar charges. And they were threatening to give these students life imprisonment because after several protests to the authorities, the students got fed up and decided to occupy the computer center. Yeah. And a fire broke out or was set. Hardly likely by the students because they had been locked inside of that room after occupying it for a number of days. So no one is going to light a fire to burn themselves. Fortunately, someone was able to get an axe and smash to the back door and get out. So that the National Joint Action Committee took up that issue. Yeah,
prominent among them was Andrew. He's now Bukareni. Yes. And there was a young lady named Valerie Charles who then became Belgrave, and the man who she was married to, Teddy Belgrave. So those are among the 3 who are at the top of my mind, but there were these other 7. Yes. And the issue was that just months after that, the Canadian Governor General was coming to Trinidad, and so students on the St. Augustine campus decided that he wasn't going to enter there because of that, and that led to a whole string of other things.
Yes, yeah, the Canadian Governor General was blocked from entry, and the students began to agitate, as well as the chief servant and Macandal Dagger and Kafa Kamban went up to Canada and to take the feelings of our people here to Canada, where the students were being put on trial. And the chief servant told them in a nationwide interview, in no uncertain terms, that whatever they do to our students up there, we will do the same to the Canadians in the Caribbean. And after that, he knew he had to mobilize the population to show them that NJAC was serious.
And that happened, and that mobilization happened from one end of the country to the next. Then they were known as Geddes Granger and Dave Dabo. So for those few of us who could remember that, without being coached at all. But so NJAC was the premier organization at the time, sort of a collaboration of other radical groups in the country at the time.
Yes.
But I don't want to jump too far ahead, or leave out particular vital information in the center there. But the fact is that after a period of time, the leadership in that sense began to get dispersed, so that Cambon then went and formed his own organization, which today is what you call the Emancipation Support Committee. Even my friend Iago Rome, who now he was in the leadership group of NJAC for a period. He now has an organization called the Sinui Center. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about is that sort of the way in which a lot of organizations, people, there are disagreements, if you like, with what is happening, and people have different ideas and move off and form other groups. That's
well, you see, the question of Ome forming other groups, he took a sort of a back seat at a particular time.
Right.
He wasn't quite well at that point in time, and as such, he still makes his contribution in his own way.
Right, and he had a letter to the editor in the paper this week, going back to that.
But this is the point I'm making, that he's still vocal. He still tries to get that message across. But I think that we sometimes talk about 1970 and what took place and what happened, but we need sometimes to go a little deeper into the whole thing. First of all, I would like to just say a few words about the chief servant, Markandel Dagger, because oftentimes we speak about 1970, but the chief servant is not mentioned. We speak about March Carney, which I would like us to look at what took place in Tobago. But the chief servant was an exceptional leader that was able to spearhead that movement that mobilized Trinidad and Tobago. Not in a year. Well, yes, there was the groundwork that was laid from the formation of NJAC. But that period of 1970, it was really fantastic. Thousands of people in the streets every day in Trinidad, as well as in Tobago, from where I originated. And the philosophy of the movement, the ideals of the movement, was based on justice, because in spite of the gaining of independence, Trinidad and Tobago was a very unjust society. I know that we are still plagued with the injustices even today. Right, but in 1970, the leaders of the movement and the youth of that era were dismayed by the gaining of independence, and yet the injustices remain. Only in 1969, the year before 1970, the Mount Irving Bay Hotel was opened in Tobago, and it was a racist hotel. As black people, as Africans, as Tobagonians, we couldn't go there and buy lunch or buy a drink or even play on the golf course.
That some of the organizations that faced the brunt of the protesting and the activism at the time were Canadian organizations in Trinidad, such as the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce and so on. And then the Catholic Church, had what was the historic, I wouldn't say storming, but the entry into the church of a cross-section of the people.
Yeah, it was just, that was really spontaneous, right? It was not even to say an attack on the church. It was just spontaneous. Somebody just said, look, let's go into the church. And the demonstrators went in there, and they debated with one of the priests, you know, in terms of the role that the church should be playing. Well, they were concerned about the fact of all the images being white, and two persons draped some black cloth over the Holy Mary and Jesus and what have you. And the powers that be, the government of the day, decided to use that to try to snuff out the movement. Demonstrators, the leaders were arrested, about approximately 10 of the leaders were arrested the following morning in a pre-dawn raid about 5 o'clock in the morning, and charged with desecrating a place of worship, even though Archbishop Pantin came out and said that there was no desecration. Yeah. And the charges were not removed. They were placed on they were arrested with denial of bail until thousands of people started to respond and go down to the station where they were being held, and then they decided to give them bail.
Right. And then in 2020, was it, the current Archbishop, there was a massive turnout there on that anniversary in 2020, in which he appeared to put it in a context that, you know, people thought was sort of exemplary in the way in which he described it. And
because he said that as far as he's concerned, the revolution had not been completed because of the poverty in some areas, the dispossession, the quality of life that some people have to endure. He said that the revolution was not completed. Not only in 2020 when we did that 50th anniversary, but we had a 50th anniversary conference which was scheduled for April that year, which did not come up because of the COVID. So we still called it the 50th anniversary, even though it was only held 20th and 21st of April last year, 2023.
Right.
And Archbishop Jason Gordon did speak there. And the point being that it was a occasion where we were looking back at 1970, its impact, the values that were put out. For example, the movement was one of inclusion, right? So that the slogan was young and old and young, all belong in the new society.
Yeah.
And Jack did a lot to bring the women of the society to the fore.
Well, there was the NWAC, the National, the Joint
all of that came out of the
Action
yes,
Committee
all of that
and so
came
on.
out of the movement, because we were seeing there were a number of principles: love the children, prepare the youth, respect and elevate the woman. As a matter of fact, the first principle would have been honor the old, because we recognize the role that those who came before us played. The Tubal Uriah Bus Butlers, the Kola Rienzis, the Maraj, those who were there before.
Talking about Bades, Sagan, Maraj.
Well, Bades, yes, but it was more like Chan Maraj, and there were some others who had done a more positive type of contribution. But the point being that it was inclusive, right? The movement was promoting a philosophy that one's value was not dependent on their wealth, their racial background, whether they were rich or poor, whether they were male or female, right? Their ethnicity.
What do you make of?
In other words, we were advocating for a society of inclusion, right? And that was critical to the movement of 1970.
Now, what would you say is the situation now? Because
before we come to know, I must outline what really took place in 1970, because people talk about the movement and the revolution and the changes. The changes were not brought about by NJAC. This is the point I'm bringing across. NJAC was the leadership, but what NJAC did, the organization went on a mass enlightenment program.
Well, yes, but that was the basis on which the changes came.
I know, but people are not aware that of the role played by the youth, the role played by the women, the role played by the workers, right? It was a mass movement, and they were the ones who spearheaded.
When you say people are not aware, you mean people now?
No, people know. right?
But the fact is that the history is there, who lived it, and who, there are several books that one could pick up and read about it at different junctures. And the question I want to ask then,
Yeah.
so there was this movement and this spirit known as the February 26th movement. And
Good.
But in 2024, how many of us have any connection to that if we weren't around, or if, you know, there's some people who studied it academically and so on?
That is the sad part of it. But the point I'm making is the most critical aspect, because people believe that a government could change a country. We knew better, right? This is why we said if you change the government, but you don't change the system, there's not going to be any change. And it was that enlightenment of the masses, right? And you had the established powers unleashing terror on the population during the state of emergency to put them back into subjection, to subdue them again, right? To silence their voices.
And then you had even more aggressive organizations coming out of that. You had the National Union of Freedom Fighters and so on and so on. There's a long list of people who were killed, who took up arms against the state in some ways.
Yes.
We have sort of come back from that in that kind of way. You know, you see, you get to the brink and you come back, and you know, so one of the things that sticks with me now is that there are these other groups having been formed by people who were in the leadership of NJAC. I mean, Clive Nunes was a critical factor in it. I was in high school in 1970. There was a meeting, I see it now as we speak, under street light in front of a grocery store in Paraseco Junction, and he spoke for almost an hour without any notes. I'd never seen that before. Where is he now? So Cambon has his own organization. His son is sort of in charge of part of it. Ome has formed an organization. The question is, what has happened with those energies, and how is it? Is it the normal kind of thing, so that people, you drift apart?
The point about it, one, at the conference we had last year, they were all there. Cambon was there, Nunes was there, Ramrekha Singh was there.
I guess this Ramrekha Singh.
Yeah, you know, they were there. But how many persons actually benefited? Now, yes, it was streamed live. A number of other territories in the Caribbean, North America, UK, as far as Australia, the United Arab Emirates, different countries logged on. But in terms of the masses in Trinidad and Tobago, it would have been, yes, we had a good turnout, and there was a number of students. Their schools were represented from as far as Faizabad, as well as North and East and West Trinidad. But the population at large still remains unaware. And what a lot of people don't know, even though there's this racial divide today in the politics, in 1970 there was a march in which approximately 40,000 people took part from Port of Spain, from Woodford Square down to Chaguanas, down to Couva. And that march did a lot to eradicate the race politics.
And that is even, would you consider that? Because there is part of a narrative which says that it could have been even more effective if not for the collaboration, the conniving of Dr. Williams and Barry Sagan Morange.
Well, maybe so, you know, but generally the support that the African communities receive was massive, to the extent that the demonstration was really a march to Kawane. That's what it's called, because that was the intended destination. When it reached down to Kawane, the Indian population told Makandal Daga, listen, if you want to get to the heartland, you have to go down to Couva. So they extended themselves down to Couva. And as a result of which, it went very late into the night. As a matter of fact, they held a People's Parliament at the Couva car park, because this is something, again, that we need to recognize, the fact that only 1 week after the first demonstration, NJAC held its first People's Parliament, giving the people the opportunity to express their views to place them in the leadership of the movement. And that parliament in the Couva car park led to the eventual departure of Tate and Lyle from Trinidad and Tobago and the establishment of Colony Trinidad and Tobago Limited, which we know is now defunct.
Yeah, how would you, where would you place the NJAC now in terms of what is happening in the world today, in our world today, if we want to talk about Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the region, and the need for, some people say, for that kind of action and consciousness building and development will go on, so that when we have now the big thing is Emancipation Day, and the organization that carries that, carries the flag for that, is an organization, as we said, that came out of the NJAC. Where do you place the NJAC in terms of, is that just how, the result of how we continue to osmose as societies, that one group and one strand of thinking will take over from where they met, and things will get changed? I put that against the fact that you said earlier that governments don't change anything. And you had was it a good fortune to be part of a government? The government that we had in Trinidad and Tobago between 2010 and 2015, probably the most integrated in some ways from what we've seen before.
Yes, it was good, and we know that we made our contributions. But getting back to that relationship between 1970 and the present, because a lot of what NJAC advocated, maybe not just in 1970, because in 1970, because of that movement, and again, because of the enlightenment of the population and the new value systems and the new principles, the crime rate went down in 1970 by 56%. And you are talking about an organization that only had 55 days on the road before the emergency was declared, and the leadership was imprisoned for 8 months, right? And not only that, but the youth of 1970 were becoming more interested on the blocks. They were becoming more positive. They were reading the papers that NJAC was putting out. Liberation today. The Liberation, as well as the several other papers. Because people speak about the liberation, but one of the policies of the organization, that once a new zone was set up in a new area, that area brought out a newspaper. So you had more persons writing, you had more information flow, you had developing what I describe as each one teach one. Because as one learns a little, they taught those who knew nothing about the movement, and those who knew more taught more, etc. So it was a chain of education coming down from the leadership right through. And coming out in the movement after 70, when the chief servant was saying the direction the country was heading, we were going to end up with the level of crime that we are experiencing today. NJAC was called prophets of gloom and doom, as you would remember. So that it is not that the ideas were not there, but the ideas were stifled.
What is the situation now? I mean, so all these decades later, when there has been a greater measure of freedom and acceptance, and people were buying into these notions about how we build a better society.
Well, people will always buy into ideas. Okay, societies go in cycles, and the ideas, the principles, the values that were promoted by NJAC are still relevant today, possibly even more so when we look at the state of our society. The need for greater consideration for human life. And we can't just speak about that consideration for human life in the context of crime. Sometimes you also have to look at the conditions under which people have to live in some communities in Trinidad and Tobago. We have not done enough to transform our value for human life. And today that value has dipped, as is manifested in the level of crime. It is sad to see little children have to be marching for protection, right? Because we have had incidents of little children lives being snuffed out. We need to review ourselves, review our history, look back to 1970. That is the year when we had the greatest reduction in crime. Good? But when we are talking about crime, nobody says, what happened in 1970? What was responsible for it?
You think 1970 was a more positive period than, say, 1938, which was talked a lot about in 1970, and I had to go back and find out what was happening. I mean, in classes I took in Toronto,
right.
That was a period that was focused on. It had to do with same labor relations, what was happening with working and working people and workers and so on. You think 1970 in our minds has sort of built on that, and where we are 54 years later, how can we describe where we are in terms of still in this search for creating the kind of society that we ought to have?
As I said, societies go in cycles, okay? And sometimes, let us hope that people wake up at this point in time, because unless we restore a sense of community, right, which existed in the earlier years, where you are your brother's or your sister's keeper, right? What did we say in 1970? My brother, my sister. The nation was being treated as a family, and it is because of that advocacy of NJAC in 1970 and the movement that brought people together, respecting each other, loving each other, helping each other, that we were able to reduce crime, that we were able to achieve that much. Today, you drive through Trinidad and Tobago, and you see NP in 1970, it would have been Texaco from the United, Esso, Shell, BP, British Petroleum, right? And today, there are lasting achievements.
Yeah, we have to wrap up. But
had it not been for 1970, we were not going to have Point Lisa's industrial estate.
So
today.
I want us to wrap up on the phrase that was used then.
Yes.
Which we recall to mind. Aluta continua?
Aluta continua. The struggle continues.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Yes. This has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
WESN.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to himself. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have 2 of the 3 species of anteaters right here.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of this game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
Because vision doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
The British hit back, imposing a state of emergency. Numerous atrocities committed by both sides. Officially, 11,000 Mau Mau rebels were killed in the violence. Unofficially, well, figures much higher. The Kenya Human Rights Commission says 90,000 Kenyans died. Just 32 white settlers were killed. Well, the British still refuse to officially apologise for what happened, although King Charles, on a visit to Kenya ahead of the anniversary, did acknowledge the abhorrent and unjustifiable acts of violence, adding there was no excuse for what happened. Well, today, the Mau Mau are considered the heroes of independence in Kenya, but few remain anxious that their story will soon fade into oblivion. Well, for France 24, Bastien Renouy, Elodie Coussin and Olivia Bizot revisit Kenyan independence.
This hymn by the Kikuyu ethnic group pays tribute to Mukami Kimati, a Mau Mau fighter and the wife of fellow independence hero Dedan Kimati. This is Kenya's final farewell to one of their symbols of resistance. It's the first time that a veteran has been honoured with a national funeral. Until 2003, the movement was banned. But today, politicians are showing a growing interest.
With all the honours she deserves, we celebrate this heroine. She joins other heroes, the Mau Mau heroes, and all those who fought together against the colonists to free our country.
The Mau Mau fear that their history will be forgotten. After independence, the national narrative was shaped by those in power. Remaining in the shadows, members of the movement were condemned to poverty.
I'm very saddened because of such a state funeral. They have spent a lot of money, a lot of money. People from all walks of life are here. But when our grandmother was yelling, nobody went there. But right now, they are using this moment for their political mileage. It is very wrong.
Between 1952 and 1960, at least 11,000 fighters were killed. Those who survived were often forced to live on land far away from their pre-colonial homes. This farm in the Rift Valley belongs to the last surviving Mau Mau general and his family.
I bet at their time they still used to feel so much at home, having stayed in the forest for over 8 years, and then ending up in another forested area, which now they are turning into a home, but not a fighting ground. So that feeling has been translated into generations and generations, and we always love this place. In the whole world, this is my point of peace. But to be honest, what should have happened is that they should have been allocated land where they were evacuated before the settlers came in.
Land grabbing is an unresolved issue in Kenya. After the British left, high-ranking Kenyans seized their land. For decades, the Mau Mau were labelled terrorists, making it difficult for them to claim victim status. So Wilson and his family and friends set up an organisation that provides emotional and practical support to veterans. Here, Wilson's father is hosting the group. The association collects the stories of remaining survivors. They pledged an oath of secrecy, so mystery still clouds much of the rebellion. But the general is opening up about detention camps.
We were beaten if we didn't kneel down. If we didn't address the settlers in the right way. No, we couldn't. Now that the war is over, we share our memories with those who are worthy when they come to us, but we're still hesitant.
It's a dark past, which many have had an interest in burying.
Whatever our fathers did was never reported in the right way. So people ended up worshipping the ones who are not the owners of independence. So we feel like we have a duty, especially as Mau Mau children, to put this one right and be able to tell the world what happened.
Since the ban on the movement was lifted, Mau Mau fighters have become known as independence heroes. However, government support for the group is still patchy. In the centre of Nairobi, few streets are named after them, and even fewer monuments have been built in their honour. This is due to a lack of political will, but also historical records. Only only a small part of this National Archives Museum is devoted to the resistance movement.
There's a lot of stuff I didn't know. We weren't taught in school.